Good morning, everyone. My name is Eswar Bala. I am an engineering manager in Amazon EKS. I'm co-presenting this talk with Nathan Tabor, who's product manager for Amazon EKS. So this session is called Past, Present, and Future. So I want to touch upon all things EKS, what we've been up to in the last year, how are customers using Amazon EKS, and how is EKS going to be evolving over the next few years. So we've seen good adoption in Amazon EKS, and we primarily see four kinds of workloads running on top of EKS. So the first one is microservices. So it's the top workload that's running on EKS, and which is usually what the Kubernetes itself ends up pushing you towards. So we also see platform as a service being done by enterprises building platforms on top of Kubernetes for their development teams. So this is usually because they want to abstract parts of Kubernetes or the whole Kubernetes so that the developers ends up just writing a Docker file or a pod spec, and then the platform itself takes care of provisioning everything for that particular service. This is our lift and shift primarily. So a lot of customers end up also using EKS to take their monolith applications and moving to a container world and then deploying on top of Kubernetes, right? So this is their first step towards modernization of their stack. Then they chip off the monolith, break away into microservices, and off they go. So the last one that I want to touch upon is the machine learning workloads that are running on top of EKS. So if you told us that machine learning would be one of the top use cases for EKS, it would be like really hard to believe, and that's where we are right now. We have a lot of customers running machine learning tools like Kubeflow, using frameworks like TensorFlow and PyTorch on top of EKS. So what's happened in the past year, right? EKS team has been really busy delivering over 75 features in the last 12 months. I want to do a quick rundown of things that are notable. I won't be covering everything in this slide. So primarily we shipped something called IAM roles for service accounts, which enables you to associate an IAM role towards applications running on top of the EKS clusters, Kubernetes clusters on AWS. So it nicely translates very gracefully into the Kubernetes world. So you can assign an IAM role to a service account, and then you can leverage IAM at a pod level or even at a namespace level. This was one of the most demanded features from our customers. So with this feature, we made pods first-class citizens in the IAM world. So rather than intercepting the requests to the EC2 metadata API, what we do is we've actually changed the AWS SDK to recognize that a pod is actually trying to get the IAM credentials and then provide it very seamlessly. So one of the things we've also announced general availability support for Windows containers. And with this feature, you're able to run workloads using different operating systems in the same EKS clusters. So the next thing I want to talk about is the node termination handler. A lot of our customers love using Spot instances. They love the cost benefit. They love the performance boost that using Spot instances provide, right? And these customers have told us that they'd like to see the Spot applications running on Spot instances in their Kubernetes clusters be handled gracefully when the Spot instance is going to go away. So what we've done is we have this termination handler listens for these Spot termination events and then triggers the workflow of like cordoning and draining the applications running on top of these Spot instances. So the most interesting thing here is the node termination handler can actually simulate Spot instance termination so that you can actually see how your application is going to behave when the workflow kicks in. This is an open source project, and you can actually use it in any Kubernetes clusters running on top of AWS. So I want to touch a little bit about the tenets we took upon when we decided to do EKS. So the first thing, obviously, is to be able to run production workloads on top of EKS, which translates into us bringing in our operational and security expertise to managing Kubernetes. The next one, the most important thing that we wanted to do was also be native and upstream. A lot of customers told us that, like, we just want Kubernetes to work, right? So we decided that there's no better way to do that than to just run Kubernetes itself. So the most important thing that customers tell us is, like, Kubernetes, I mean, among all the cloud providers, Kubernetes runs the most on top of AWS. And this is because customers love the breadth and depth of the services that AWS offers. And we wanted to make sure that we provide seamless integrations into all AWS services out there, right? That exist today and that come out in the future. And obviously, we wanted to contribute a lot into open source because it matters to this ecosystem, and it's the right thing to do at the end of the day. And we wanted to make sure that any new service integrations that we do it in a way that customers can leverage it, not just using EKS, but also just running. If you want to run your own Kubernetes clusters on AWS, you should be able to use all of these service integrations. So I talked about some of the features we delivered, but job zero for the EKS team is security and reliability. Our customers run critical production workloads on top of EKS. And EKS, as a team, we've invested very heavily in making sure that we deliver towards those expectations our customers have for a high, secure, and operationally stable service. EKS has created millions of clusters cumulatively and have handled millions of upgrades cumulatively as well, right? At our scale, change management becomes extremely critical, right? Even a small, minuscule change that triggers that could potentially have an impact could have an impact at a very to a huge customer base and to a lot of clusters. We want to make sure that this change does not impact the whole service at the end of the day, right? Bob talked a little bit about the blast radius concept, and we use what we call as a cellular architecture. So we compartmentalize our regional footprint into a number of cells, all right? So cells are our deployment units at the end of the day. Any change we make sure that these gets deployed into one cell at any given time. In fact, it gets started as partial deployment into one particular cell. And then things look good, we promote it to further deployments within the cell, and then everything looks good, we go on to the next cell, right? So that's the way we progressively deploy any change that's happening. In our biggest region, we actually operate up to 20 cells. We've also invested heavily in making sure that new Kubernetes version releases doesn't impact any issues into upgrade. We've started testing applications that customers are using as part of our version qualification process. And so the most important thing, security patching. We've seen a number of CVEs in the last year, right? And EKS has actually taken it and rolled out the security patching across our fleet without even customers interacting. And for the most part, these have been done without even before these CVEs have actually been publicly disclosed. So let's talk a little bit about the control plane. This is the part that we run for you today. So this is the managed control plane, which we end up exposing as a Kubernetes control plane endpoint. And this is all you need to focus on in making sure that you're hitting these API endpoints to deploy your applications. So we get paged for issues like etcd quorum failures, nodes going down, issues between different AZs. If something like that happens, we are on the hook for you for that, and you're not. Ideally, you don't even notice that. Also, if you're using any CI/CD tooling, you just need to make sure that you point at this endpoint and off you go. So a little bit of visibility as we zoom in. This is highly available single-tenant infrastructure. This is entirely, if you come and create a cluster, every resource we end up spinning up is entirely yours, and you're not sharing with anybody else, right? For example, like when you create a cluster, there's an NLB fronting your cluster. There are real EC2 instances. There are real NLBs, and you're isolated within your own VPC. So the control plane architecture that I talked about is like highly available. And we provide an SLA of 99.9%. This is an agreement and not just a best effort. So we've made a bunch of investment in our community-related projects as well. We have our own VPC CNI plugin. We've delivered multiple features and multiple releases of this CNI plugin. For example, we support advanced networking use cases where you can provision your nodes in separate VPC CIDR and your pods in separate VPC CIDR. We've also made sure that the CNI plugin caching releases the IP addresses that it doesn't use aggressively back into the VPC pool so that you can leverage it for other purposes. We've made substantial improvements in the storage drivers, for example. We support XFS for EBS. We support volume expansion, which is in alpha right now. We've also introduced a new CSI driver for the FSX for Lustre file system. So why does it matter? So our mission here is to make sure that AWS is the best place to build and run using Kubernetes. Remember, I'm not saying EKS here. We want to make sure that every Kubernetes on AWS user benefits from the work that EKS team ends up doing, right? Our goal is to remove the undifferentiated heavy lifting your teams have to do to get new ideas off the ground and out the door. EKS is just one of the ways you do that. And EKS team will continue to heavily invest in service integrations and build them in such a way that you don't have to use EKS to actually leverage all of that effort. So with that, I'm going to actually wrap up my portion of the talk, saying we've made a lot of progress to keeping our customers happy, but it's still day one for EKS. We recognize that our customers are wonderfully dissatisfied, even if they don't realize it. And customers always want something better, right? And we'll continue to investing in delighting you all. With that, I'm going to turn over to Nathan Tabor, who's going to talk about things you love. So.